The book of Acts 26 verse 8 says, Then Agrippa said to Paul, You almost persuaded me to become a Christian. You almost persuaded me to become a Christian. That is a king. And one of the assignments that God had given Paul was to preach to the Gentiles, the Jews, and then to the kings. And it is usually interesting that when God gives you an assignment, you have to be ready, because the way to the platform that God has given you may be tough. It may be filled with tests and trials, and by the time you get there, it may not be so joyous. Sometimes we look at people, we look at ministers, and we see, okay, these are very successful people, and we compare ourselves to them. Or we look at business people, and we wonder, okay, how did they get so much success? But we never sit down to really think about the way to the top, the way to success. Because one thing we have to realize, that for you to get to what God has called you to do, sometimes it may be filled with tests and trials. The Apostle Paul received a very high profile assignment, because to witness to kings and people in high authority, that's very high profile. Because the Bible says when he got saved in Acts chapter 9 in verse 15, the Lord said to him, Go, for he is a chosen vessel of mine to bear my name before Gentiles, kings, and the children of Israel. So for sure, that's a very high profile assignment. And Paul, we read the Bible, he was able to preach to every king that was connected in that area, geographical area. He preached to Governor Festus. He preached to King Felix. He preached to King Agrippa. He preached to the governor. He preached to Bernice. And at one time, the angel of God encouraged him and told him that, well, you'll also stand and preach the gospel before Caesar himself. Caesar was the superpower of that time, the king, the president of a superpower nation at that time. And the angel tells him in chapter 27, verse 24, Do not be afraid, Paul. You must be brought before Caesar. And indeed, God has granted you all those who sail with you. So he was able to do that. But when you see the way Paul reached these people, the kings, and even Caesar, there was a lot of hazard. There were trials. He survived stoning. He survived death. He suffered shipwreck. At one point, he was in danger of a snake bite in Malta. But in all this, God protected him, and he was able to fulfill his assignment. Because when God gives you an assignment, be ready, because sometimes the way to that platform may be filled with trials and challenges. I pray as you face this week, may God give you the grace to endure every hardship, to endure every trial, that you may be able to fulfill that assignment that God has called you to do. God bless you. See you again next week. Bye-bye.